Okay, as I mentioned, Bay Macfarlane, founder of Mary's Advocates. They're located online at marysadvocates.org. Since 2004, Bay Macfarlane has been upholding the dignity of marriage in light of no-fault divorce. Mary's Advocates is a voice for faithful spouses and provides resources to equip those in positions of authority and influence to encourage reconciliation and denounce marital abandonment and unjust separations. And we have her on the line. I just, because I found this, I believe on her website, Sister Lucia Fatima said, quote, "The final battle between the Lord and the reign of Satan will be about marriage and the family. Don't be afraid," she added, "because anyone who works for the sanctity of marriage and the family will always be fought and opposed in every way because this is the decisive issue." And then she concluded, "However, Our Lady has already crushed its head." So encouragement there, right? Bay Macfarlane, good morning. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Dr. Chris Malloy is here with us along with Sissel, so you may hear some different voices asking you questions, but thanks so much. Tell us just about, it says since 2004 you've been fighting for the dignity of marriage, and we just heard from Sister Lucia saying if you do this, you're going to, there's going to be battles, and I'm sure you've fought many of those. Tell us, what was the inspiration to begin this fight with Mary's Advocates?
I and my husband were serious Catholics, would never miss Mass on Sunday, and for reasons that remain a mystery, I became a defendant in a no-fault divorce case. So somebody was giving my husband advice that filing for divorce was the right thing to do, and I was very disheartened about the response that I got as a spouse who wanted my husband to keep his marriage promises. I was very disheartened by the response that I got from the church, from church writings, and also from the government no-fault divorce court. So I just dug into researching. With most divorces, children have to go back and forth between mommy and daddy. So when my kids weren't with me, I just started researching, and I started publicizing on the internet what I found about church teaching on separation and divorce. And then I started finding other people who were in the same position I was in, where we were serious Catholics. We thought our spouses were abandoning our marriage, and we were supporting each other on remaining faithful to marriage, and then learning what the church should be doing according to our own canon law in response to situations like that.
Yeah, and when you talk about no-fault divorce, it seems that it's pretty easy to get those, isn't it? And I guess this is where the civil courts and the church come into play, and that's where there's some confusion. I know you believe that perhaps the church has ceded a lot of this authority to the civil courts. Just how simple is it for one spouse, even if the other one doesn't agree, to get a divorce?
Sure. Depending on the language in the state, anybody who's married who goes to the divorce courts and says, "I want a divorce," will get it. That's how easy it is. You just have to use the right vocabulary. In Ohio, you have to say incompatibility, separated for a year. In some states, it's, "Oh, I believe we have irreconcilable difference," or "our marriage is irretrievably broken." So it's just a matter of saying certain words on an affidavit, and then the court will force a divorce on the children and the other spouse. So that's how easy it is. In the old days, it used to be that the civil government upheld marriage and expected people to repair the harm they caused to their children and the other spouse when they broke their marriage promises. An abandoner would be expected to uphold financial support. Someone who's committing adultery would not be required, the children would not be required to spend overnight visits with someone who was committing adultery. Someone might even be thrown in jail for abandonment because it was a crime. Now it's upside down.
And the law is such a teacher of morality. We know that, that obviously human law, civil society, whether it's criminal or civil law, it's not necessarily correct, but it does teach. And so our society with this no-fault divorce is teaching young people and already married people what marriage is, or as it were, by default, that's what they're doing. And here's a problem. The church has her teaching on what marriage is, and separation, annulment. Could you go through those just so we can know, as Catholics, we shouldn't let the society define what marriage is. Our church knows what marriage is. So could you comment on that?
Sure. Marriage is something that God put in human nature. It's part of natural law. So the secular system is all upside down. So by human nature, marriage, and by natural law and divine law, marriage is permanent. You know, when you marry somebody, if you're actually entering marriage, you have the heartfelt desire to be with them forever till either one of you dies. You have the heartfelt desire to raise a family together. We want to have children. You would be horrified if your spouse was having sex with other people. You know, of course, you don't want your spouse to be committing adultery, and you know you're going to cooperate together to maintain a home. That's what people promise and what they expect, and that's actually the rights that go back and forth when people marry. So if someone breaks those promises according to the church, first of all, it's immoral, it's wrong. But secondarily, the person who broke the promises, who's causing the trouble, is obligated as much as possible to repair the harm and continue to uphold the promises so children could still be raised in an environment where children are being raised as Catholics, morally grounded.
And no, you haven't even brought up the sacrament. So this pertains to natural law, and I don't know if our listeners are aware of that, but this is actually what Bay has said is that that's the church's teaching about natural marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, Bay.
And then what the church did, and in my research, I've gone back as far as the Council of Trent and just before, which was a response to King Henry VIII and the Luthers and the Protestants splitting off in the 1563 Council of Trent. The church said that never can the Catholics let the government make decisions in cases of separation. So if someone committed adultery is a legitimate reason for separation. It's such a violation of marriage promises that it is a legitimate reason for separation. But the spouse that's not committing adultery is the one that should be responsible for the upbringing of the children, because we care about children being raised in a moral environment and not being given scandal. And to answer your question, the church's teaching on all of this is that prior to anyone being permanently separated, the church needs to make a determination. There needs to be some outside judge determining whether there really is a legitimate reason for separation of spouses. And that's part of our canon law, and it has been, I found, going back to the 1500s. It's still here now. So
yeah,
and if we're following
let me give out the phone number, because I know there's people listening. They may want to call in and ask a question. Like I said, divorce affects so many people, even in the Catholic world. We know that's true. Unfortunately, if you have a question, Bay Macfarlane is our guest. MarysAdvocates.org is her website, and she's been fighting this battle since 2004. The phone number, 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424, if you have any question or comment.
And just to elaborate on what Bay is saying here, yes, we have the canon laws that teach this, or through the legislation of the church. And someone might ask, yeah, but the church can change canon law. The church can change some laws, but listen to this. This is Pius XI. Okay, Pope Pius XI. He says, "Let it be repeated as an immutable, inviolable, fundamental doctrine. Matrimony," by the way, he's talking about natural marriage or sacrament, it doesn't matter. "Matrimony was not instituted or restored by man, but by God. Not by man were the laws made to strengthen and confirm and elevate it, but by God. Hence, these laws cannot be subject to any human decrees or to any contrary pact, even of the spouses themselves." And he goes on to say, "This is an infallible dogma of the Catholic Church." This is not a matter of just policy.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Bay, back to you.
Go ahead. Yeah, what's your comments on that, Bay?
Well, this is where I was saying earlier that some entity needs to be making a determination whether the parties really have a legitimate reason to be separated, because the church is, and this is the church, some entity in the church needs to prevent scandal. Because what happens down here on the ground, two Catholics, they're married. One decides, I'm so miserable, I need a divorce. And the church remains silent while that plaintiff in the civil court forces the family through no-fault divorce. That's what's going on down here. And what's supposed to be happening is the church is supposed to be weighing in. Kind of like if you had a abortionist who was a Eucharistic minister teaching PSR, blatantly, oh, I'm a super Catholic, and he was an abortionist. I mean, I'm extreme example. We would expect that his pastor would pull him aside and say, excuse me, Dr. Jones, you can't be doing both. And, we all know that the church isn't doing that. Everything's crazy right now. But, we would expect it to do that. The church should be doing the same thing with separation of spouses cases.
Yeah. So
where a husband...
No, I'm sorry, babe. So right now, if you want to get married, you got to go and get the marriage license, and that's more of a civil thing. And then you got to go to the church. And I'm just trying to think, from a historical standpoint, and as compared to how we're doing it today. What's a perfect scenario? What should be should the state be involved at all, or what should be the balance between church and state when it comes to marriage?
Well, it's handy to know if your kids are in public school who the father of the children is. And marriage is a way that's known traditionally. It's handy when your kids are sick. If one of the parents holds the health insurance, it's nice to know, when the other parent brings the kids in to the doctor's office, the parent can bring in the health insurance card. Marriage is a civil marriage license is a registry showing who's married. I'm okay with that. But when it comes to defining the obligations of the spouses towards each other and marriage, because of no-fault divorce, when Catholics get their state marriage license, I see a problem because in the public's view, it appears that they believe the marriage obligations as the secular system defines them, which is anyone who feels like getting a divorce has the right to a divorce if they ask for it. And that's not Catholic marriage. So I think, and Mary's advocates even suggest that people sign a document when they enter their Catholic marriage to try to set their marriage apart, saying, look, when we're marrying, we're signing a covenant, arbitration agreement even, that says we understand we're accepting the obligations as the church understands marriage, and if we have an issue, we want church doctrine to define our obligations towards each other. So that's when people get married. Then, if there is a really bad marriage crisis, say someone's an unrepentant adulterer, say someone was seriously mentally ill at the time of consent, and during their courtship, they had a little illicit episode of not being mentally ill, and you married someone who's truly mentally incapable of marriage. That does happen. It's happened throughout history. At the time of separation, the church's doctrine and natural law should be relevant on what the obligations are. So when there's someone who thinks they need a divorce, in the church's own canon law, and our catechism says divorce is a grave offense against nature and immoral, sometimes it's tolerable. Well, it's tolerable after an investigation has been done that says, you know what, there really is a legitimate reason for separation of spouses here. And this woman, for example, who was just totally mentally off a rocker when she got married, the husband doesn't owe her half the property because he's been giving her free room and board for 2 years, and now we've discovered this tragedy. She walks away and she takes nothing.
And it's not...
That would be that's how it could be played out. But if we don't get that much, at least the church should step in and instruct a husband who's miserable, who wants to go dump his wife, excuse me, sir, you can't do that and call yourself a Catholic. Instead, why don't you work with these experts that help couples reconcile? Yes.
No, that so well said. And just to be clear for our listeners, that a civil divorce, if the Catholic Church goes and pronounces on a marriage, she declares nullity. That means there never was a bond in the first place. So the Catholic Church can't break the marriage, but she declares that there never was a bond because they were unable to, one party was unable to establish it by a lack of true freedom. And this is absolutely crucial. And you're helping Catholics we're essentially living in Egypt. We're like the Jews living in Egypt. And I reference that because I'm in Exodus 90 right now. Dave and I are both doing it. At any rate, so we need to retain our identity as Catholics. And it's not just regarding sacramental marriage. It's regarding also natural marriages. And the church helps us to get clear on what the natural law is in these cases. And she can educate people before marriage, and then, as you said, in a crisis situation, what should the priest do when one spouse comes and complains about the other? You have a great article on this. Maybe you
Yeah. I just want to throw out the phone number one more time. If anybody has a question or a comment, Bay McFarlane from Mary's Advocates joins us here on Journal Live. 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. Dr. Malloy mentioned your article, and I also, if you could talk about any publications you have, and also I want to ask you, Bay, about the True Marriage Proclamation set, which you promote as well. What is that?
That's the document that we suggest people sign to set their marriage apart from the no-fault divorce world's understanding of marriage. So it's kind of like if you and a car dealer, sorry to make this so crass, but silly, if you and a car dealer were having a contract and you were buying the car, but mostly that car dealer only leases cars. So when you go in there, you want something in paper that you both understand. I'm actually buying this car. I'm obligated to pay you for the car. I get the whole car. And then if instead that car dealer only did leases, you want to set yourself apart from the people who are leasing their cars. So when people get marriage licenses or they're married with the Catholic understanding of marriage, why not put something in writing that says this is what we intend? So that's what the True Marriage Proclamation set is on Mary's Advocates website. And as far as publications go, I was thinking what I wanted to tell your listeners, and really, if there's anyone out there who is in a marriage crisis where someone filed for divorce and both parties seem to care about being Catholic, Mary's Advocates shows people, the person who wants to keep their marriage together, how to petition the church, asking the church to do all these things I've been describing, where they would investigate, they would determine that, a wife who's just unhappy with her husband can't be dumping him and demanding a divorce when he's done nothing grave. And the hope would be that good pastoral correction would keep families together.
I can't help but think the crisis in marriage, as we started the whole conversation about, is having an impact on the church. It's having an impact on membership, how attractive the Catholic Church is to join converts. Dr. Malloy, you've got a study that you read that shows pretty dark numbers as far as people becoming Catholic or leaving the church, and I just can't help but think that this is somewhat related to the crisis in marriage.
It probably is.
Yeah.
I mean, just as a little tangent, Pew Research has a study called religious switching. Listeners could look it up. And what it says is it's essentially adults changing, religion, one religion to another. And mainline Protestants are maintaining basically steady. They're losing a little bit, not significant. That's alarming in itself. But evangelical Protestants are gaining slightly. The group that is gaining the most is the non-religious. And that group is gaining 4 converts for every 1 that they lose. How about the Catholic Church? Get ready, buckle your seatbelt. The Catholic Church loses 6 members for every 1 she gains. Mm-hmm. Loses 6 members for every 1 she gains. That, on any accounting whatsoever, this represents absolute and unmitigated failure of the leadership of the church.
But Bay, any comment on that, Bay?
Well, yeah, one of the things I've seen, my area of study is divorce, and one of the common factors with children of divorce is they lose their faith. And if I'm a child of divorce and my parents are raising me pretty Catholic, at least we go to Mass a lot, and then, I'm 10 years old and Daddy is having an affair with some lady and we go through no-fault divorce. So now I'm court-ordered to go back and forth between Daddy and his new sex partner and Mom. And then 2 years later, Daddy marries the new sex partner in the Catholic Church because they got an annulment. I'm going to think this Catholic Church is a joke. So here Mommy and Daddy are teaching me one thing about marriage, but my experience is that they're condoning my demise of my upbringing, me losing everything that was familiar to me, because being a child of divorce and going back and forth, it's a big pain in the neck. And from our perspective at Mary's Advocates, we support the people who would be the wife that's left behind, and when the daddy leaves the mom, the wife is saying, I love your dad. We're married for life. I'm going to be loyal to Dad like Christ is loyal to his people. Dad's just in some kind of moral coma right now. We pray that he wakes up. It's not, I hate your father. or he's gone, it still is upholding the marriage.
Yeah, love and truth. And by the way, there are stories where someone comes back years later. But Bay, you have knowledge of Greg and Julie Alexander, who do great work, you say on your article. Could you talk about their work, because that might be something that gives hope to people in very difficult situations?
Greg and Julie Alexander have been doing marriage coaching. They kind of have a discipleship program where they help people who are in a crisis marriage situation. And the way they do it is couple to couple. And they started their work because they were in a horrible crisis marriage situation when they had 2 children. This might have been 18 years ago. And they both wanted a divorce. Greg talks about how they hated each other. Julie talks about how she didn't even want him to touch her. When he would touch her, she would kind of cringe. And they came out of it through proper pastoral care, and just they worked through it. So now and the church teaching on marriage was a big part of their restoration of their marriage. So they teach other people to do the same. And they've got like a 97% success rate. They've worked with 4,500 couples, and all but about 30 of them have been restored on the other side. And the hope is that when there are times, and it's kind of normal. It's kind of normal that in a really bad time in a marriage, a wife might be physically disgusted by her husband. But that's not a reason for permanent separation and divorce. It's a reason to get the right kind of help.
All right, we're just about out of time. I know you got a split, Dr. Malloy. Bay Macfarlane has been our guest. The website, again, is marysadvocates.org, and we appreciate so much you sharing this with us. And I think one of the keys is we just have to get back to the basic teachings of the Catholic Church. I read an article, and it's all related. There's an article, the German Bishop Synod is on their working document is calling for approval of contraception, homosexuality, women's ordination. A lot of confusion.
Autoeroticism.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And so, Bay, I mean, it all connects. If we all will just stay true to the traditional church's teachings on these issues of morality, marriages will be better. There won't be as many divorces, and there is a lot of confusion out there. And so, any last statement? Thanks so much for being with us. What else would you like to say before we say goodbye to you?
Just that it's really send people to us who are in these situations, in a crisis marriage situation where the plaintiff in divorce is a Catholic, or even someone who's trying to defend their marriage in an accusation of invalidity of a marriage. We can help with that.
All right.
Thanks for your work.
Yeah, thank you. marysadvocates.org is the website. Bay Macfarlane has been our guest. Bay, great speaking with you. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being on the program with us today. All right. This is GRN Live, and we're going to take another break here in just a minute.